I'm very quickly going to take you all through four projects in the next 1 minute and eventually talk about the project that I want to. Uh, the first project that you see over here that we worked on, and all these projects were worked on in 2020 during the lockdown. The first project that you're looking at is actually a public toilet prototype where we focused on technology, materiality, and human centric design. The second project that you're seeing over here is a school project in Senegal, also a competition entry. We're calling it Courtyard of Knowledge. The idea here is to use architecture and materiality to create opportunities of education for the children in this community. The third project that you see, also a design competition, was actually a home for a family of 16 in Tanzania. And even over here, the idea was to use local materials and indigenous construction techniques to create a home for this family. And the fourth project that I'm showing right here on the screen is what we're calling as the Market on Wheels. This project actually won a design competition for us globally. We stood first, and the whole idea was to create a product or a project which essentially responds to COVID. And here we had actually created a prototype of a market on wheels. It's actually a hand cart, but we definitely layered it with far more details. um, this is actually the project that I'm now going to be focusing on. The project is what we're calling as the algal microforest. Through the course of this presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about certain facts which are obviously backed by citations. And obviously, it was these facts and some of the available resources that led us to creating this particular project. So the idea is that we are creating an urban furniture that essentially harnesses the ability of algae to act as a greenhouse gas sink. This is a quote by Ansel Adams. He's actually a renowned landscape photographer. He said that once destroyed, nature's beauty cannot be repurchased at any price. I mean, we know that if you destroy nature, it's very, very difficult to, repropagate it, right? So, what is the prevailing issue at hand? Now, to understand the issue at hand, we've actually considered Bombay, that's my home city, as a case study to sort of understand that the recorded air quality stands almost 600% worse than WHO's air quality measurement standards. Of course, these are citations that were taken, at the time of doing the research. The city is also spread over 604 square kilometers, of which only 15.37 square kilometers accounts for the total accessible open space, which means that only 2.5% of accessible open space is available for the citizens of Bombay. 94% of Bombay has been paved and concretized in the last 4 decades. And in this process, we have lost 60% of our vegetation and 65% of our water bodies. So, guys, these are actually the prevailing issues, at hand, which is for Bombay, but also for a lot of metropolitan cities and megapolises across the world. So this is the harsh reality, right? Our cities are getting bigger and denser, and the green cover is dwindling. This has obviously led to urban heat island effect. It has led to deterioration in the air quality, and obviously it has also affected the quality of life. So on an average, the air quality index in most cities in India is actually categorized as hazardous. Now, on the right, what you see over here is basically the WHO's air quality measurement standards, which essentially are 20 micrograms for PM10, that's particles with diameters of 10 micrometers, and 10 micrograms for PM2.5, particles with diameters of 2.5 micrometers. Shockingly, the air, actually, I will say not so shockingly, the air quality recorded in Mumbai stands at 104 micrograms for PM10 and 64 micrograms for PM2.5 at a time of conducting this research in early 2020. So now where are we headed with all these statistics? And basically what are our available resources, right? Now, our reaction to this entire situation was that our natural forests are being replaced by concrete jungles. We can not ignore this environmental issue. Of course, this has been happening for decades altogether, but it's getting even more worse. So what we decided is that our belief lies in preserving these forests. Of course, we can't preserve them, but we can at least partner with some tiny representatives of nature, and that is basically algae. A lot of us actually ignore algae. I mean, that's something that we've learned in biology in school, but we've kind of forgot, almost ignored it. But these very unassuming members of the plant family actually have a very, very strong potential to compete with trees, and we're calling them their massive cousins, and they can actually compete them on equal footing, and in some cases they can even surpass them in resilience and efficacy. So some more interesting facts, guys. If you look at marine algae is known to absorb carbon dioxide a lot more efficiently than land-based counterparts, namely, obviously, the trees. So for every 4.4 kilograms of carbon dioxide, that becomes sequestered within 1 kg of algae biomass. So essentially, if you have 1 kilogram of algae biomass, it absorbs 4.4 kilograms of carbon dioxide. And at the same time, there are these algae fuel bioreactors that are also existing. I mean, a lot of people have been working on these projects, but these algae fuel bioreactors soak up carbon dioxide 400 times more effectively than trees for the same footprint. And that's actually an amazing fact, right? I mean, when we got to know about this, it was shocking and also relieving at the same time. So then the question is that why aren't we really using algae more effectively to our advantage when we know that it is so strong in sort of acting as a carbon dioxide sink? So carbon dioxide that they trap in biomass, the algae can actually use this as biofuel and animal feed. It can also be used to make algal cultivation. It can be, of course, used to reduce greenhouse gases, especially in urban environments. And then, because we know that in urban environment, reforestation is actually next to void, right? Because there is so much of built form. So the idea is that the algae can actually help, with all these situations. And this is actually what becomes our biologically backed foundation for the concept of the algal microforest. Now we're coming to the technical bit, right? So now essentially, if you look at the image on the right side, what that image shows is that it's actually a hexagon comprising of 6 triangular modules. And each of these modules, basically, this is like a perforated metal sheet, which the holes are made enough to basically hold a test tube. Now, these test tubes are actually containing the green luminaries, and these are the Marimo moss balls. The Marimo moss balls are a type of algae which are ubiquitous. Essentially, they can grow anywhere and they exist everywhere. And they're also very robust, and they propagate in most environments with extreme ease. So if you look at it, what this is that this is one test tube that you're seeing, which is filled with these moss balls, and then all these test tubes essentially become a part of one module. So that's what you see on the right side. Now, this is when we worked with Harshit of Green Bubble from Bangalore, and he was the one who kind of advised us, to use the Merino moss ball, because there were two things. One is that we were also having a limitation in terms of the space because these algae are actually confined to a test tube as opposed to, let's say, a lake or a water body, right? The Marimo moss balls also don't grow like don't grow frantically. I mean, they will grow, they will still continue to perform their activities of absorbing carbon dioxide, but they will still remain within the test tube. So this actually is a mock-up that we created where you can see that there is an LED light that actually is the light source for the moss ball to essentially perform photosynthesis, right? And then and absorb carbon dioxide. But also what you see on the right is that we did not want this to be just a solution in that sense. We also wanted to be a little bit of, I mean, to add the value of aesthetics, right? I mean, that's what designers do, right? We add aesthetics. So what you see on the right side is the kind of reflection that it creates on the floor when it is hit by the light from the ceiling. Now, guys, what you see on the right is the entire structure of this. So basically in the center, this is right here. This is where you see this tree-like rig. Now, this rig is designed in a metallic frame, and it holds one, two, three, four, five, six. You can only see two of them, but it holds six hexagonal panels around us. Each of the hexagonal panels, what you saw on the earlier slide, I mean, that is one panel right here. Now, this is that one panel which actually contains the test tube. The way the panels are designed is that each of these panels is also encased in a steel structure, which is also perforated for ventilation. The yellow dots that you see right here are actually, the LED lights. And basically, what you see on top over here is an aluminum cover. And that aluminum cover is essentially, topped with photovoltaic stick-on cells. The idea is to make this entire system self-sufficient, right? So essentially, you do not, I mean, this is actually a system that can not only work during the day, but also works at night. Because during the day, there is obviously enough of natural light to help, with the process of photosynthesis. But even at night, because these photovoltaic panels have absorbed enough light during the day, they're supplying electricity to the LED lights over here. And these LED lights essentially help with a certain continuation of the process of photosynthesis for these moss balls. So the idea is that, this is basically what, the system is. And if you look at this image on the right, each of these hexagonal modules are also basically placed at different heights. The idea was that they, in a way, also mimic the undulations of the natural foliage. So in tropical climates, like in India, the Marino moss ball can also be replaced with spirulina. So spirulina is an algae. It's also a superfood. And what this does is that, we can then also sort of, propagate urban farming. Spirulina is basically a great supplement of protein. It can also be used for fuels, for cosmetics, for animal feed, and apart from, purifying your air and water. Now, what you see right here, this is essentially what, the whole furniture system looks like. So this is where, we spoke about earlier that it is an urban furniture which harnesses the ability of the algae to act as a greenhouse sink. Now, the idea of this piece also is that, it is 2 meters tall in height, right? So it actually provides refuge from sun and rain because it is completely covered. So, you can take a break from the weather over here. It gives you shelter from the rain, from the sun. Also, at the same time, when you look up, it kind of gives you that sense of walking under, a cover of trees. So basically, when you are in the city, you obviously yearn to be in a forest, right? You want to walk under a foliage of trees. And this is actually what this particular installation does. It kind of, you start resonating with something that you've been missing. Uh, at night, what is even more beautiful is that this particular structure starts emitting a very soft green glow. So it creates a very beautiful environment, where you can sit under and basically, you can have great conversations in the evenings. So to sum up this entire presentation, this installation or this urban furniture actually works like a photobioreactor. That was also one of our key inspirations in the course of our studies. And it uses light to synthesize the biological process of photosynthesis. And obviously, in the process, it acts like a greenhouse gas sink in the urban environment. So I guess, guys, that's pretty much what my presentation is all about. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Monish, you can take over.
Thank you, Josefa. That was a great presentation. And 1 second. Should I? Yeah. Do you see my screen right now? Hey guys. So today I'll be talking about like some of the work that we are doing, where the whole idea behind the work is to how we can actually readapt traditional techniques in the building construction and how we can actually apply it in the modern day with like in the current projects that we are doing, and the material medium that we are using is terracotta. So we are a small bunch of architects, designers, engineers, and artists working together to like, on this domain called what we call as Coolant, wherein we are trying to see how we can actually readapt some of these the traditional techniques in the building construction. And the whole purpose is like, how can we actually bring down the energy that is consumed by in the building construction industry, especially for cooling. And we actually started off as a, I mean, we are as an architecture practice. The scenario how we started off is like, how we can actually use art as an actually a medium for not just for expressing beauty, but also like, how we can actually throw these little experiments that we do, because those are things clients really don't really bother to like, think too much about it. If you say that we're going to experiment too much with the entire building, they always like something or the other. But with art, like in the form of art, we started looking at how small things that we can actually like investigate and explore. So before going into like what we are doing, these are some of the most fascinating examples that we really found, like which used to work, I mean, which are still working in most of the places in the world. Like, like for example, earthen pots, which are like used for cooling, and how people on the left hand side, you can see as a basic thing for like, in Egypt, how they were using earthen pots for different purposes, including building walls and like typically for cooling water. But also in Greece and all these places, we also like art as an art, how the expression started to come onto this functional units apart from cooling water. So in Egypt, like if you notice, these pots, actually the pharaohs, they used to like fill these earthen pots filled with water, and they were just fanning the surface of these pots for cooling. And similarly, I think you can notice even modern examples like Lotus Temple, wherein there is a water below, which is actually keeps the entire thing, the air trap that gets cooler, and then keeps the entire building on the top, like, it brings down the temperature like really good. And I mean, we are really not short of examples. I mean, there are like tons and tons of examples in Indian architecture, like, where how jalis and perforations are actually like how those things were, the whole design of the building evolved around like maintaining the microclimate like cooler. So yeah, but if you keep on moving, like Malkeos wind catchers in the Middle East, and courtyards, and even like, for example, in recent times, like the courtyards, the court scrappers that we have seen, and fountains. And these are very simple techniques which really do not need a lot of brains actually to do something like this, and which work around the simple example of evaporative cooling. And like, how these systems, like, for example, Venetian blinds, how they're actually at smaller scale, keeping the sun and the out, but also letting the wind inside. And in Egypt, if you look at the beautiful example on the right hand side, these are called sheesh, wherein they used to take these reeds from the river and lay them one on top of another, and then use like mats, nothing but basically mats. And they evolved in the Egyptian era, and then they used to put them as curtains over the windows and just pour water on top of it needed for cooling. So, and which evolved further into this beautiful examples, what we call as mashrabiyas, and what, like for example, like the Jarokas and Jaisalmer. But then the word mashrabiya basically means that, a place for drinking water. So they constructed this beautiful lattice structures in wood, wherein earthen pots filled with water were inside. And then as the air actually passes through this the wooden lattices, it's not only cooling the water that is meant for drinking, but also brings like cool air inside. And then there is this the way the whole hot air circulates within the building, and everything is like really like, what do you say, done both beautifully and also scientifically, well. And some other like, like manifestations of the same idea in different places. But unfortunately, if we look at the way the thing is happening right now, this graph is particularly mind-boggling for us, because if you notice, in 1902, when first air conditioners were introduced, and if you compare it right now, all of us know that, there is a lot of consumption. We keep hearing this every day in and day out. But numerically talking, the amount of the carbon dioxide that is released in just in 2 days in 2019 is as much as in the entire year in 1902. That's the kind of load that we guys are actually, as a building construction India, we are having on the environment. So, like, I mean, I think this is a vicious circle. We don't have to talk about it. As in, we are trying to cool, and the hotter increases, and then the more the cooling demand increases, and so on and so forth. And so, what we are particularly trying to do is, what is it that's very simple techniques or something that we can readapt, and then how we can actually bring back maybe some of these traditional systems. But at the same time, obviously, there are a lot of constraints. I mean, I think it might be too ideal to say that we can actually replace the entire air conditioning units with something very passive and stuff. But at least, like, our whole objective is that in the buildings that we are doing or the projects that we are doing, even if we can replace 40% of the spaces with natural systems, what we can do. If this particular graph demonstrates that, every year very particularly to India, 15% of the people are actually adapting more and more air conditioners, which means that, currently as a nation, like at an average, only 5% of the population has adapted to air conditioners. And in the future, like, if you say that if this number goes up, I think that just imagine the amount of, the need on air conditioners and also the energy need on the building that we will be facing. If this starts, because India being such a huge nation, it can have massive impact on the energy needs on the environment. So, so what is the, as a nation, I think we are the first country to actually come up with a cooling action plan to find alternatives for for air conditioners. So the whole point is that what is the alternative? Is there, so our objective started revolving around, can we look at natural systems which are back again, readapt them with modern systems that are there, technologies, and combine it with that. So if we can see, even if at a very optimistic level, even a minute change can actually cause something like a big impact. So we have been experimenting with this idea of coolant, wherein trying to see if somehow we can actually convince the clients. The more important art actually comes into play, because that's how sometimes it's becoming easy for us to convince the client, saying that okay, not only these systems can actually look good, but also we can try to make it maybe as a feature or something more than just as a functional installation. So what we're calling it as a functional art. So this is our first installation, coolant beehive. It started off in a factory in Noida, wherein we just put some earthen pots in front of a DG set, and when actually the hot air passes through this and comes out, it's naturally cooled. It's a very simple mechanism. There is no rocket science behind it. And the way we stack this thing in a form of a beehive, so that we can actually get the surface area of, we can work with the surface area of the pots, and by pouring water on it, we can actually cool the air that's passing through. Like I said, it's a very simple system. There is no rocket science behind this at all. But the whole point is, how do we optimize it? The whole point, if you pour any water on any surface and let air pass through it, it naturally cools. That's the whole concept of evaporative cooling. I mean, if you look at desert coolers, or even hay, and this, like we spoke about, this, even putting this mats on the windows and pouring water on them, it also cools a cooling effect onto the building. So why terracotta? I mean, what is the whole purpose of doing terracotta? Is there any? So I think that's where this entire thing comes into play. So terracotta by default is a hydrophilic material, which means that it absorbs water, and even if there is humidity in it, it tries to maintain the surface of it cooler, because that's sheer the way the material property it is. And what we have done is because that's the reason, that's how the earthen pots keep the water cool. There is capillary action, water is absorbed into the pots. And as the evaporative cooling happens, the water inside remains cooler. In this case, what we are doing, we are pouring the water on the surface, and then as we're passing through the hot air through the whole thing, we are getting how we can actually drop the temperature over there. So try to combine it with this some kind of analysis to see what is the optimum thing that the results that we can get, and how can we improve this even further, and so on and so forth. So we have tried this in different places. Every time we are also learning a lot. I mean, because there is since evaporative cooling really differs with climate, and also what kind of the location and the external factors a lot. So we are experimenting with different things and see how the system can actually work in different places. So there's a similar installation but a different configuration that we have done for a science festival in Lucknow. And then the further installation that we thought, okay, maybe we'll combine it with also with greens, because the natural property of terracotta is that earthen pots for drinking water. All the plants that we see, most of them, I'm not talking about the fiberglass planters that you see, but the traditional earthen pot, the pots, the matkas that in the garden for growing plants. Similarly, we thought, why not actually use this installation also for growing greens on top of that, where you actually try to see just that can actually work both for cooling and also for greens. In a way, trying to see if we can come up with a zero plastic vertical garden of sort of a thing. Then, the same thing at a smaller scale, we said, okay, now we have done that. Let us try to see in this installation that we have done in Kanuri Art Gallery in Sept, wherein in an indoor space, how this system can actually work, and whether, like I said, the whole concept is of a evaporative cooler. But the thing is, with terracotta, if we can actually try to also play with the aesthetics and stuff. And the spot that you see in this in the hands of Jusubhai is that we can actually have like a system that also can be used for cooling air and water at the same time. So and so on and so forth. I mean, so the whole idea, I mean, the more and more we started playing with it, we realized that there is like too much potential with the same system. I mean, the way you stack it, the way like this material has a flexibility to like try different things. So we said, okay, we wanted to go a little bit more adventurous and trying to see something like a cooling tower. So that can actually like it's more radial in nature. So that it also becomes like an maybe like public space. In this case, we are trying to cool this for the entire what do you say this room with the system. And we have done this for an art festival in Goa. And what we realize is that in this particular case, like I said, like even Huzefa was talking about earlier, this moss and other factors. I mean, they have this tremendous character for actually absorbing the carbon in the environment, carbon sequestering. And one byproduct of this entire system is when you're actually pouring water on terracotta, moss actually grows naturally. You don't have to do anything. You just have to make sure that you're not pouring chlorine in water, and this moss grows beautifully on top of this. So we wanted to also try this tower to see if this can actually become a air purification, like something like an air purification tower at the same time, using like you can see the concept of air scrubber. So this how the system looks. In on the right, you see that we have tried the same thing with ceramic. So and we're taking all the air from all the sides and actually bringing it in the middle. So and circulating in the system for cooling. So based on the same idea, like I said, I mean, one thing is leading to another. Like based on that, then we said, okay, let's try something even bigger. This time, along with cooling, what if we can actually try this air scrubber at a much larger scale? Not only that can actually cool, but also probably help in reducing the pollution in the inner cities. So something, but not this is not a typical smog tower because we are not using any filters in this particular case, but more like an air scrubber with this wet pads inside that can actually absorb the heavier carbon particles. And there's an experimentation in progress, so I cannot really comment on the efficacy of this. But this is, like I said, I mean, this one thing we are like in the process of experimenting with the forms rather than and see how things can actually evolve into something more than what it meets the eye. So, I mean, like I said, I mean, the whole idea started with that how with one installation in a factory. Then we started looking, okay, terracotta as a medium, it's like beautiful. We can actually do a lot of stuff with it, and then we can also at the same time, rather than talking about a functional thing, can we also create about like through art in public spaces? Can we create climate awareness and actually talk about some of the social issues, and at the same time promoting the traditional methods that have survived for like many years. The main reason also that people can, I mean, in manner we get like closer to the traditional community, the craft and artisans who are working in it. And so this one installation wherein we tried to create a very parametric form, and we also experiment a lot with these parametric tools and modern forms. So we said, okay, like what is seen as a very I mean, the provocation behind this is that whenever you used to go with terracotta to any person, they would say that, hey, this is like super terracotta is so cheap, and probably, I mean, it's not the kind of response we expect from some people. So we wanted to say, okay, let us show terracotta from a slightly different perspective, also adapting to like forms that are very much contemporary and also like modern at the same time, so they can so that challenge the whole perception of terracotta in the first place. And so this is these are some of the images from working, I mean, from the site, wherein the roof tile that we removed in this particular project, we try to convert that into an installation in the same site rather than like throwing these tiles away or something. We thought, why not actually do something with this? And this one is on a similar thought, like trying to show that terracotta can be something way more, like I said, way more contemporary, and also like as a form it can be much more adventurous. Like in this particular case, it was a pavilion done for a workshop at SPA, wherein we thought maybe we can talk about the issue of like how pangolins are being, I mean, as one of the most endangered species in the world right now, how we can actually talk about this particular species through the form that we are generating here. So, and these are some of this is the last part of the presentation, wherein these are some of the other works that we are doing, trying to see how we can adapt this whatever started off as a journey with art into building facades and screens, how we can try to bring back this passive screens and evaporative cooling to the building facades, and see if we can reduce, I wouldn't say like completely replace, but reduce the dependency on air conditioners, like through having the second screen and jalis that are actually made in terracotta, and combine it with evaporative cooling. So for a school, so we started like working with this artist and who can actually also make some kind of beautiful this artifacts and stuff for students, kids that can also like teach them a little bit about like ducks and monkeys and peacocks, whatever really helps. So we start like then I mean for terracotta we even an exposed brick and trying to combine it with jali systems and also grow these creepers on top. So trying to see where this can actually lead forward. And this is the last project, wherein the whole idea is that while we are actually working with this the medium that is there, the whole thing is that how can we really relook at the way that modern buildings are there. And in here, the whole idea behind this is to incorporate a bio atrium in the middle, so that we can, because air condition, I mean, in atriums are one of those spaces like huge volumes that have to be cooled. Like even though the human height is only like at an average like 5.5, 6 feet, but then here we said, okay, why not actually, instead of cooling the entire atrium, why not like put like a beautiful bamboo trellis in the middle, and then having greens, which is again the form can be very contemporary in nature, but and then integrated. You don't see the beehive or the terracotta thing in between because of the graphic, and then you can actually suck the air through the whole system, which is green, and then circulate into the building. So that in a way, like I said, I mean, part of it is actually completely glass building, air conditioned. Part of the whole thing is actually you can natural in a manner. So yeah, this is how like we were imagining this thing to be. And yeah, so I think that's about it, guys, from my side. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Priyanka from Prelab Design Studio. We are two partners in the company, myself Priyanka Narula and my partner ABK Kasi Raju. Both of us are trained architects, having a bachelor's here in India and having done a master's in Barcelona together. So, starting with the background, where we started and where we are today, we worked during our early years. We worked in grassroots level sustainability, and we worked with Ramdurt Construction, CSCB Construction. Moving from there, we went for a master's to where we started talking about computational design, complex geometry and design, and also talking about advanced forms of manufacturing. Something that bugged us for most amount of time was this inner conflict that is machine better or craft, is parametric better or sustainability. And having worked over multiple projects, we came to embrace our varied experience of life and work, and we embraced machine with craft, machine with machine and technology, and trying to bring it back into our current practice. So we took divergent methodologies where we worked on art installations. We just sorry. Yeah. So we embrace the idea of machine with craft, parametrics with sustainability, exploring in practice, and efficiency for future abundance. We took this methodology of working in varied fields like exhibition design, product design, even graphic design, sort of exploring different ideas and seeing where our practice eventually culminates to. So the idea is that we don't take one project that defines us as a design practice, but we taking the whole thing together as a 10-year plan, which defines what design innovation would mean for us. So we've worked in architecture. We've worked on our 3D printed product line. We've even worked on a few art installations in the past. So the current project I'm about to talk about is Wicker Story, which is sort of a culmination of these different kinds of projects that we did. Now, having worked in parametric design, we realized that complex geometry is something which is an essential part of it in terms of design and also in terms of execution. Um, while working on one project with Wickr, we stumbled upon the idea that what forms a surface, primarily the U direction and V direction of a surface, can be translated into how weaving is done. So weave basically is same type of material or two different types of material interwoven in two perpendicular directions. And this starting initial idea was what catapulted into the entire project, and gave us an opportunity to start working on product design. And now currently we are trying to explore it at the scale of interior and even architecture. So the idea of the project is that it should talk about design innovation through methodology of manufacturing, but also through design. But at the core of it, all our products are handmade, all our products are sustainable. The methodology involves 0% wastage of material. So this is the first product that we made in the series called Imli. Here we were trying to make an art installation for Maker Faire Hyderabad in 2018. And because an art installation, we wanted to play with the idea of nostalgia and make products that could relate to anybody and everybody. So Imli means Imli also being called as Chintapandu here. It meant so many memories like mother's food, all these students that I used to have as a child, and these Imli candies that my grandmom would give me often. So we translated that into a product, into a scaled up Imli pod. And when we went about exploring ways of manufacturing it, we realized that we rather stumbled upon the idea that Wickr easily moves and molds across a complex shape like the Imli pod. The discovery here was also that though the material was very traditional and nostalgic at the same time, what it could do has no bounds really. The construction of the product was seamless and jointless here. And because it is a skeleton and skin framework, the product was extremely lightweight. So the project technically happened by accident. And the kind of response we got for Imli took us to the next level, where we decided to set up Tree Lab Design, the Wickr story, and hence the later products that you'll see. This is another product. This is the Lifafa chair, for which we won Eldecor's Furniture Designer of the Year last year. Again, we wanted to play with the idea of nostalgia, and nostalgia for me meant these envelopes my relatives would give with money in it, while leaving home. So every Sunday was about anticipating some relative coming home. So just wanted to translate that into a product, and that's what the Lifafa chair was. So essentially, taking the idea of Wickr from product to a larger system, a larger setting, we came up with the idea of topology, where we are talking about Wickr as a solution for large scale, molded, complex surfaces, for example, ceilings, walls, maybe an integrated system where all of this converts into a furniture as one single complex design. So these are more images for the topology. The beauty of the whole process is that since it is hand done, hand woven system, we do not rely upon a 4x8 module as standard in the industry. So we are easily able to scale up a design from, let's say, 4 feet length to say 12 feet length to 3 feet length without having a joint in our product. And additionally, the more we are scaling, the lighter our product is. Here is a lampshade that we've designed called Intimacy Lamp, where two directions, when you see the product from two different directions, the form changes shape. This project is an exotic blooming teas. We are did the interior design for the project. This is the first time we tried executing large-scale wicker installation in the project. The inspiration for the wall, that statement wall, came from the tranquility of a cup of tea, uh, which is basically serenity. Now, since the project is a tea store, we took the idea of Japanese gardens and the idea of flowing water around rocks and translated that into these wicker panels. So here is another view of those panels with the central bits which represent rocks, providing for branding for the company. This is another product called Ivy. We did it for our participation at Design by Design under 35 this year. We were given a space here which was 15 feet tall, and the idea was to be able to scale it as high as possible. The intent was to express the material, to express potential more than the concept of the actual product itself. So we went with the idea of Ivy, which helped us work on modules and variability in sizes of each module. And the size of the installation that you see here is 13 feet in height total and 4 feet in width. Some more views of the piece here. One of the last products I'll be talking about is this Bloom Bench, where we started moving away from the abstraction of our previous products and started talking about a product which is simple in terms of the ergonomics, in terms of how it connects to a user, yet at the same time, there is an inherent complexity to the product itself. So the blooming part on the side is actually the side table of the bench. So it's two-seater bench with a side table that blooms along. So there's complexity yet simplicity. Some more view of the products. One of our latest attempts have been to explore the idea of wicker and manufacturing on a larger scale. Because yes, wicker does have shortcomings when explored in an exterior setting, but we want to talk about a hypothesis where wicker helps us provide forms and shapes, and these forms and shapes form the base for composite materials that begin to inverse. So this is a pavilion we suggested for Maker Fair Hyderabad again last year, with the idea called Mugu. So Mugu, if somebody knows the southern part of the country, these rice rangolis that are made in front of the house every single day. So it signifies purity, it signifies welcome, it signifies good health. And that is what we wanted to suggest for a pavilion at the entry of Maker Fair. So it was a simple pavilion where, it provided space to sit, provided space to play out and express the intent of the material. So here are the views for that. One of the last projects that I'll be talking about is this home for autistic adults, which it's a ongoing project which we are doing here in Hyderabad. The whole landscape we tried making it a playful landscape with space segregations and organic walls, which would provide for textured sensory surfaces for individual with suffering from autism. So these walls have been explored in the project in terms of exterior walls, which are cast in concrete, and also as internal walls, which are a part of the interior settings. So this is a work in progress, but the intent of this project is that we start from a product level where the research and investment is slightly easier to handle, and from there we take a step at a time, growing from product to interiors and then to architecture. So, one last thing I would like to emphasize here is that the idea of innovation in architecture becomes a tricky affair because, one, from an architect's perspective, from a firm's perspective, it becomes a very expensive affair. Secondly, not every client is willing to take a risk on an architect, and that is, these two factors are something which we faced as major challenges in the beginning of our career when we were trying to explore complex designs. This is where Wicker, sort of made the journey much easier for us, because we started working with craftsmen, we started working with technique and material that was already available in the market. When we started making products, we out of it we realized there is a way to innovate the industry itself. So it is no more about innovating design or geometry, but it is rather about taking wicker as a material and saying what next and what's the future of wicker in a time where 3D printing will take precedence, robotic fabrication will take precedence in tomorrow's world. So, how do we take a local methodology and adapt it to something more powerful, which has a vision for the future? So, that's about it. That's my time. Thank you.
Uh, we are a 9-year-old firm, and we started our journey with a lot of projects which we made into an experiment. And what I will share initially would be some of our works, architecture, furniture, and design. So this is a school which we finished 3 years back for kindergarten students. Um, then we did a lot of art installations made out of different materials. So this is a paper tube pavilion we did in Delhi. It's a temporary art installation. We did another pavilion in Delhi, which was made out of plyboards. So the entire journey of NBlack has been to explore different forms of material, and also trying to stretch the limit or the structural limit of that material. This we had done at the India Art Fair. So it was a canopy made out of 600 floating pieces, and each being a different size, a different number, and putting it together. This screen we had done in Dehradun. So again, with all this work, the idea was to use a component, explore that component as a material, and then make it into a form which is visually very simulating, as an installation, as an experiment. This was another piece of work we had done. We had exhibited in Delhi, and which is now in Kanpur, where we are again experimenting with wood as almost a fluid material. Uh, there are a lot of these smaller experiments which we have done in furniture, in art installations. This is a bent metal dining table. Uh, Experimentation with bending wood to generate a kind of self supporting structural frame, uh, working with again different kind of plywoods and wood. Um, is another example of bending. So having done a lot of experiments with material, couple of years back, one of our clients came to us wanting to do traveling exhibition, kind of a hall, or not a hall, but a gallery, which we could kind of put it in a container, take it somewhere else, put it up, and then have art displayed in it. So it was a very interesting project for us, and there were his brief was very clear that I would, a 20-foot container is what you would get, and this is the budget. It has to be prefabricated. We don't need plinths. We don't need any form of permanent architecture per se. So our entire process started with what becomes a structure which is self-standing, and also there was this lot of discussion within the studio that what we don't need from a conventional form of architecture. Like, how do we look at something in literally by rejecting a lot of things which we consider must as design. So we started uh, developing a lot of forms, and one of that exercise, out of almost 6 months of exercises, was working with circular forms, because circular forms give you a lot of freedom in structure. They are self-supporting. The material used is much less. And then we started exploring conical forms, working with different angles, analyzing those angles with usability, analyzing those angles with structural stability. And then we came to material, that okay, we have, let's say, some idea of the form, but again, that form at a certain size would become very difficult to achieve. So we went to the idea of bending a certain material to create strength, and in this case we decided to use metal sheet. uh, so based on the requirement, based on the material we wanted to use, based on the size of the container, we decided on a particular form with those parameters, which we decided. We had a certain square feet area which we had to cover. So all those exercises were done, and we finalized one form out of many iterations we had done. And the
Jonathan,
form which, yes,
Jonathan, your screen, yeah, your screen had stopped. Yeah, now we can see your screen. Right.
yeah, okay, okay.
Screen.
So out of many iterations, the final form we kind of decided to move on with was 1100 square feet space, which was 6.7 meters in height, 11 meters diameter, which could open up, fit into a container, uh, and would take X number of days to be put. So there were a lot of assumptions as well when we started this work, and we were quite grateful to kind of have a client who was ready to experiment on something which we had never done before. And this was what our proposal to him was, a folded metal plate structure. And then we were also, because of it being a kind of a parametric exercise, we were able to kind of even demonstrate the possibilities of the sizes of the structure reducing in future, and then clubbing those structures together to create larger structures in future. Now, one part of this entire design was the concept of how we do it, but the other was the possibilities of making it in terms of the technology available in Ahmedabad, and the cost of that technology. So there were certain basic principles we took was the size of a metal sheet available. How do we divide the entire structure? What should be the number of sheets we do? Um, one module. So then we came to a module. So one module would be a module which would fit into a 5 feet by 8 feet metal sheet, which would be cut into a laser cutting file. So these were different laser cutting drawings we could send across to a factory, and then each panel would then be bent on a very precise angles to make this puzzle possible. So what we were doing in the end were we are creating a large puzzle, and each piece has a unique number. That number comes from a diagram. So this is the diagram which actually goes on site and nothing else. So we have all the sheets which are cut, which are bent, which come to the site, and based on this diagram, they go into a particular location. Um, and what we had done was we had also then used the same sheets to kind of demonstrate how we could kind of fit into a container. Um, uh, the very one of the most challenging part of the structure was also waterproofing, because when you have you have about 150 pieces of metal put together, bolted together, and is supposed to be taken apart to be put somewhere else. The detailing became very important, and everything has to come from a very complex model, and then become something into an object made out of very specific sizes of metal sheets, because the weight also becomes very crucial. So these were certain details which we had worked on to make sure that the waterproofing is maintained, and with that the structure doesn't fail. How the door would come in, what the end, how will be the angle of the door, how will it open, how will it interact with the entire system. We were also, because of the form, it was very critical. How do we put our lights? How would it light the entire structure, give flexibility during exhibitions to change? So we devised a kind of a floating ring in between, in the middle of the structure, where all the lighting fixtures could come in. We also provided for certain ventilation systems, so that the air could, we have kind of good movement of air. Here you can see how the panels could be stacked together during transportation. And then at every stage we kind of pick up those numbers, start to put it up. So initially, when let's say the puzzle is coming together, we have to use scaffolding for people to climb and install the entire pavilion together. But once we have the entire system put in, we can take it off. So right now the stage is that we have put almost the entire structure together, but smaller elements like windows and certain things are in process. The entire, so there is no plinth here. We only have about a 3 to 6 inch high kind of brickwork lining there, to make sure that the water during winter, during monsoons, don't penetrate inside the building. Uh, so these are also the windows. If you see, then there is an overlap of panels happening there, where we have the windows within those panels. So again, waterproofing, overlapping of joints, all of that become very critical to the structure. Uh, these are some of the other images of the entrance. This is how the structure is from inside. Uh, Now it's a stage where we'll start to put insulation sheets and all of that to not allow just this 1 mm of metal sheet to kind of let all the heat, Ahmedabad heat, come in. Uh, you can see the light penetrating from the windows, the overlapping windows. There are also these small hooks which we have provided in the bent metal to allow a lot of hanging of paintings or whatever the future use as per the curators. Thanks. This is the setting of the entire gallery.